Imagine you're an astronaut, like way up there, hundreds of miles above the Earth. And you're on this, what's supposed to be a quick trip to test out a brand new spacecraft.
A shakedown cruise.
Yeah, like a shakedown cruise, basically a test flight,
Right.
just to make sure everything is working the way it should, right?
Exactly.
And you're thinking, okay, I'll be back home in a few days, no big deal. And then, bam, something totally unexpected happens.
Oh, well.
That's exactly what happened to two NASA astronauts, Sunita Williams and Butch Wilmore. Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're going to break down their story, how they ended up stuck in space way longer than planned, and how they're finally getting back home.
It's a pretty wild situation. You're right. They were on the ISS, the International Space Station,
Yeah.
for this big, maiden crewed flight of Boeing Starliner. This was a big deal. They had to, really put this spacecraft through its paces up in orbit. But then things went sideways. There were these propulsion issues with the Starliner, basically some thruster malfunctions. And that meant they couldn't come home safely back in June of 2024 like they were supposed to.
Wow.
So, yeah, we're going to dive into all of that. How they ended up spending 9 months on the ISS and how they're finally coming back to Earth.
9 months? That's a long time. They went up thinking it would be, what, like a week tops?
Yeah, quick trip in and out.
And then suddenly it's almost a year in orbit. That's got to mess with your head.
Absolutely. And it's way longer than the typical astronaut rotation on the ISS. Usually it's around 6 months.
Oh, wow. So they're really pushing it.
Yeah, they are. And think about the human side of it. You pack for a short trip, right?
Right.
And then you find out you're basically moving into space for almost a year. I read that they had to have extra clothes and stuff like toiletries sent up to them.
Wow, that's crazy. You don't really think about needing more socks in space.
Right. But it just shows you how the everyday things become so important when your stay gets extended like that.
For sure. And you could tell the public was really captivated by their story. The news was all over it. There was a lot of, concern and sympathy for them.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And now everyone's excited for them to come home. The plan is for them, Sunita and Butch, along with another NASA astronaut, Nick Hague, and a Russian cosmonaut, Alexander Gorbanov,
Okay.
to come back on a SpaceX Crew Dragon.
So SpaceX is stepping in. That's pretty cool. Like a rescue mission?
Yeah, you could say that. And the Dragon actually docked with the ISS this past Sunday, March 16th. Must have been an amazing sight.
I bet. So when are they actually splashing down?
Well, the current schedule has them landing off the coast of Florida this Tuesday, March 18th at 5:57 p.m. Eastern Time. But get this, they were originally supposed to come back no sooner than Wednesday.
Really? Why the change of plans?
NASA said it was to give them more flexibility, with the weather and all. They're expecting some bad weather later in the week.
Makes sense. Even in space, you can't control the weather back home.
Nope. And all the preparations, like closing the hatch between the ISS and the Dragon, they're broadcasting that live starting Monday evening.
Oh, cool. I'll have to check that out. It's amazing how much goes into making sure everyone gets back safely.
Oh, yeah, tons of planning and coordination. It's pretty impressive.
Absolutely. And what's interesting? This whole situation with them being up there for 9 months, it's like a real-life experiment.
How so?
Well, it wasn't intentional, but it shows us what it's really like for astronauts to be in space for a long time, not just in a simulation or anything.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Because 9 months is a long time, but it's not the longest anyone's ever been in space.
Right. There have been some incredible long-duration flights. Just last year, in 2023, Frank Rubio, a NASA astronaut, spent 371 days on the ISS.
Wow, that's a new U.S. record, right?
It is. And then there's the world record. A Russian cosmonaut, Valery Polyakov, spent 437 days on the Mir space station back in the 90s.
Wow. So Sunita and Butch's stay wasn't record-breaking, but it was totally unexpected, which makes it different.
Exactly. Those other long flights, they were planned that way. The astronauts trained for it, mentally and physically, to be in space for that long.
Yeah, they knew what they were getting into.
Exactly. But for Sunita and Butch, it was a sudden change. Imagine thinking you're going for a few days, and then it's almost a year.
Yeah,
That's a huge mental shift.
for sure. So what are the main takeaways here?
Well, the biggest one is that the Boeing Starliner's propulsion issues were the reason for their extended stay.
Right.
It shows you the risks of testing new spacecraft with people on board. But the good news is that SpaceX came to the rescue with their Crew Dragon.
Yeah, thank goodness for that.
It shows how important it is to have backup options when it comes to space travel, especially for crewed missions.
Absolutely. We can't put all our eggs in one basket.
Right. And remember, everyone's focused on their return now, Tuesday afternoon, off the Florida coast. It's also a good reminder of how much international cooperation goes into space exploration. We have American and Russian astronauts coming back together.
Yeah, that's pretty cool considering all the, political stuff going on down here.
Exactly. Despite all that, there's still a lot of collaboration in space.
It's good to hear. So, after 9 months, Sunita Williams and Butch Wilmore are finally coming home.
Yep. A long, unplanned trip, but they made it.
It really makes you think, though. With more and more commercial companies involved in spaceflight, what happens when things go wrong? What does it mean for the future